power, right? And so they send this nova into Latin America, where nova in Spanish means doesn't go. Because they thought they knew, but they didn't. They didn't ask. It's like a huge, famous thing in, big, huge PR bloopers. And there's lots of them. Because, oh, we think we know. But in fact, that's why we do research. That's why it's a zillion-dollar industry, because we don't really know. There's another, I used to collect these. these catastrophe stories of people who thought they knew. There's another, the famous case, it was in environmental education. It was, I think, in Indonesia or someplace, and they were trying to keep people out of the park. They were trying to create a buffer zone and leave the park for nature, right? So a bunch of guys sitting around in a room like this, I don't mean to diss us, but when you're all sitting around in a room, you don't know what those guys are thinking, but you think you do. So a bunch of guys, smart guys, sat around in a room and said, okay, here's our plan for outreach to keep the park preserved. And they came up with a poster that said, a beautiful picture of the park, and it says, leave the park for your children, or let's leave the park for our children, or something like that. Okay, sounds okay, sounds okay. He came back a couple years ago later, and everyone was telling their kids, someday you're going to live in there. You don't know how people are going to interpret it until you ask them. And asking them is not asking their boss, it's not asking the head of their association, it's not asking some guy who knows one. It's really asking them, and that really can't be overemphasized. And we all think that we know, and yeah, that's a tough thing to try to convince directors to invest in research when they know. Anyway, so yeah, so if you really want to focus on bodas, what would you do? What would you do? You want to focus on the boda market. How would you approach? It's not. Think simple. Really, really simple. What would you do? Huh? Oh, well, they're all over the place. Go over and ask some. Right? You go where there's 5 or 10 collected various streets, in various points. Go over and say, hey, do you mind if I ask you a couple questions? Or I'll buy you some tea. Can we talk for a few minutes? Yeah, just ask them. You don't have to drag them in or